There is a quiet misunderstanding that has drifted into our conversations about presence, a subtle distortion that whispers to us that to be spiritual is to withdraw, that to be awake is to float above responsibility, that to live in the now is to abandon the very human obligations that seem to demand our attention. And yet the truth is far more gentle, far more practical, and far more liberating than that. Presence was never meant to remove you from life. It was meant to return you to it. Not as a distracted, fearful, reactive self, but as a conscious participant who knows who they are while moving through the world of form. Being present does not mean sitting on the sidelines of your own existence, watching bills pile up, relationships strain, and dreams fade while you repeat soothing phrases to yourself. Presence is not an escape hatch. It is an anchor. It is the place from which real life can finally be lived, without the constant interference of anxiety, regret, and imagined futures that have not yet arrived and may never come. When you are present, you are not ignoring life. You are meeting it without resistance. The confusion arises because the ego, that restless narrator inside the mind, loves extremes. It says either you are spiritual or you are practical. Either you are awake or you are ambitious. Either you are peaceful or you are productive. But the soul does not speak in either or language. The soul speaks in wholeness. It understands that you can wash the dishes and be fully awake, that you can attend a meeting and remain rooted in inner stillness, that you can plan for tomorrow without abandoning today. Presence is not about refusing to think. It is about refusing to be enslaved by thought. There is a profound difference. You are allowed to plan, to organize, to take care of your responsibilities. What you are invited to release is the compulsive identification with the voice that says, "My worth depends on how well this turns out," or "I will be safe only when everything is under control." That voice is not wisdom. It is fear wearing the costume of responsibility. When you are present, you still show up to work, still care for your family, still pay attention to the details of your life. But you do so without the inner tension that drains your energy and clouds your judgment. You move from inspired action rather than frantic effort. You act because action is appropriate, not because your sense of self is on the line. This is the balance the ego cannot understand, but the soul recognizes instantly. The present moment is not fragile. It does not shatter when you think about the future or reflect on the past. It only dissolves when you forget that you are the awareness in which all thinking occurs. You can remember a mistake and still be present if you observe the memory without becoming it. You can plan a project and still be present if you notice the planning as a function of the mind rather than a definition of who you are. Presence is not the absence of thought, it is the absence of identification. Real life does not require you to abandon stillness. In fact, it requires it. Without inner presence, life becomes a series of reactions, one problem followed by another, each demanding more effort and producing less peace. With presence, life becomes a dialogue. You listen, you respond, you adjust, you trust. You begin to notice that when you are aligned with the now, solutions arrive more easily, conversations soften, and even difficult situations lose their sharp edges. There is a misconception that being present means you must always feel calm. But presence includes all of life, including moments of sadness, frustration, and uncertainty. The difference is that these experiences move through you rather than defining you. When you allow an emotion to be felt fully in the present moment, without judgment or storytelling, it completes itself. It does not linger as resentment or fear. It does not demand a lifetime of explanation. It simply passes, leaving you clearer than before. The ego resists this because it survives on unfinished emotional business. It thrives on grudges, on rehearsed arguments, on imagined victories and anticipated failures. Presence starves the ego of its favorite fuel. When you are here, now, without resistance, the ego has nothing to cling to. And this is why presence feels threatening at first. It asks you to let go of the familiar suffering you have learned to call my life. And balancing presence with real life begins with understanding that your doing does not define your being. You are not the role you play, the title you hold, or the productivity you produce. These are expressions of you, not explanations of you. When you forget this, you bring desperation into everything you do. When you remember it, you bring clarity. The same actions performed from these two different states of consciousness yield vastly different experiences. You can answer emails while being present. You can raise children while being present. You can build a business while being present. Presence does not slow you down, it removes the friction. It is the difference between swimming against the current and allowing the current to carry you while you steer. You still choose direction. You still exert effort, but you are no longer fighting life itself. The present moment is where wisdom lives, not because it contains magical answers, but because it is the only place where you can hear the quiet guidance that is always speaking beneath the noise of fear. When you are truly present, intuition becomes accessible. You sense when to speak and when to remain silent, when to push forward and when to pause. This guidance is not dramatic. It does not shout. It feels like a gentle knowing, a calm certainty that does not need justification. Ignoring real life often comes from being lost in imagined futures or unresolved pasts, not from being present. When you are present, you notice what needs attention now. Not everything, not forever, just now. And this simplicity is profoundly healing. The mind wants to solve your entire life in one afternoon. The soul asks only that you take the next honest step. There is freedom in recognizing that you do not have to carry yesterday into today. You can learn from it without dragging it behind you like a heavy suitcase. Presence allows memory to become wisdom rather than baggage. You extract the lesson and release the emotional charge. You keep the insight and let go of the identity that says, this is who I am because of what happened. The same is true for the future. Planning does not require worry. Preparation does not require fear. You can set intentions without attaching your happiness to their fulfillment. When you do, you remain open to outcomes that may differ from your expectations but serve you in ways you could not have predicted. Presence keeps you flexible. The ego demands certainty. The soul trusts unfolding. Balancing presence with real life also means honoring your humanity. You are not here to transcend the world by rejecting it. You are here to experience it consciously. The body, the senses, the emotions, the relationships, all of these are part of your spiritual curriculum. Presence invites you to inhabit them fully without losing yourself in them. You enjoy without clinging. You care without controlling. You commit without imprisoning yourself in rigid identities. As you practice this balance, you may notice that life becomes less about forcing and more about allowing. Not passive allowing, but intelligent cooperation with the flow of events. You begin to see that many of the things you once struggled to control resolve themselves when you stop interfering with fear-based effort. Presence reveals the difference between action that arises from alignment and action driven by insecurity. There is a deep kindness in presence, toward yourself and toward others. When you are present, you listen without rehearsing your response. You see people as they are rather than as characters in your internal drama. Compassion arises naturally because you are no longer preoccupied with defending a fragile self-image. You recognize the shared human condition beneath the surface differences. This does not mean you become passive or permissive. Presence does not erase boundaries. It clarifies them. When you are present, you say no without guilt and yes without resentment. You act from clarity rather than obligation. You understand that honoring yourself is not selfish, it is honest. And honesty is the foundation of real connection. The ultimate balance is this: to be fully engaged with life while remaining unattached to the story the ego tells about it. To participate wholeheartedly without losing your center. To care deeply without forgetting who you are. This is not a technique to master, it is a remembering. A gentle return to the truth that you are the awareness in which life unfolds, not the sum of the events themselves. When you live this way, presence becomes portable. It is not confined to meditation cushions or quiet mornings. It walks with you into conversations, decisions, and challenges. It reminds you again and again that nothing is missing in this moment, that your worth is not postponed, that peace is not a reward for future success, but a quality of being available now. And from this place, real life does not feel like an interruption to your spirituality. It becomes the expression of it. You live, you act, you plan, you respond, but you do so anchored in the knowing that beneath all roles and responsibilities, you are already whole, already enough, already home. And as this remembering deepens, something subtle begins to shift inside you. You notice that life no longer feels like a series of interruptions pulling you away from peace, but like a series of invitations drawing you deeper into awareness. Even the ordinary moments, standing in line, washing your hands, hearing the sound of traffic, become quiet doorways back to yourself. You are no longer waiting for silence to feel still. You discover that stillness lives beneath the noise, patiently present, untouched by circumstance. This is where the greatest misunderstanding dissolves. Presence is not fragile. It does not require perfect conditions. It does not vanish because a problem appears or a demand is made of you. Presence is what remains when you stop arguing with what is. It is the calm clarity that arises when you say yes to this moment, not as resignation, but as recognition. Yes, this is what is here now. And from that acceptance, wise action naturally follows. When you resist the moment, life feels heavy. When you accept it, life feels workable. The same situation, the same facts, the same responsibilities, yet your inner experience changes entirely. This is the power of presence. It does not remove challenges, it removes the unnecessary suffering you add to them. It invites you to meet reality as it is, rather than as your fears predict or your regrets replay. You begin to see that much of what you once called stress was not caused by what you were doing, but by who you believed you had to be while doing it. The image of the self that must perform perfectly, be appreciated, avoid mistakes, and secure approval, that image is exhausting to maintain. Presence gently loosens its grip. You still care, but you no longer carry the crushing weight of self-judgment into every action. You allow yourself to be human, learning as you go. From this place, effort becomes lighter. You still apply yourself, but without strain. You still pursue goals, but without tying your identity to the outcome. There is a quiet joy in doing what is needed simply because it is what this moment asks of you. No drama, no inner commentary, just engaged attention, infused with awareness. And something remarkable happens when you live this way. Time seems to soften. You are no longer rushing through moments in order to arrive at a future where you imagine happiness will finally begin. You discover that happiness was never waiting at the end of the journey. It was quietly available in the quality of attention you brought to each step along the way. The destination loses its tyranny, the journey regains its meaning. This does not mean you abandon ambition or aspiration. It means your aspirations become aligned with your deeper nature. You are no longer chasing fulfillment as though it were missing from you. You are expressing what already lives within you. Creativity flows more freely when it is not burdened by fear. Service becomes more sincere when it is not used as a strategy for validation. Success becomes more graceful when it is not confused with self-worth. Presence also transforms the way you relate to uncertainty. The mind wants guarantees. It wants clear answers and predictable outcomes. But life does not operate on contracts. It unfolds through possibility. When you are present, you make peace with not knowing everything in advance. You trust yourself to respond wisely when the next moment arrives. This trust is not naive. It is grounded in the lived experience that you have navigated countless moments before, often without the certainty you thought you needed. In this trust, fear loosens its hold. You realize that much of what you feared never actually happened, and much of what did happen was manageable when met one step at a time. Presence teaches you that you are more resilient than the anxious mind suggests. You are capable of meeting life as it comes, not because you control it, but because you are rooted in something deeper than circumstance. As you continue living this way, relationships begin to change. You listen more fully, not to fix or impress, but to understand. You speak more honestly, not to dominate or defend, but to connect. You notice when your reactions arise from old conditioning rather than current reality, and you choose again. Presence gives you this space, the pause between stimulus and response, where freedom lives. This pause is sacred. It is where old patterns lose their power. It is where forgiveness becomes possible, not as a moral obligation, but as a natural release. You see that holding on to resentment keeps you anchored to the past, while presence invites you into freshness. Forgiveness, then, is not something you do for others. It is something you allow for yourself, so that your energy is no longer trapped in what cannot be changed. Gradually, you stop seeking peace as an achievement. You stop treating stillness as a reward for having completed your responsibilities perfectly. You understand that peace is not opposed to action. It is the quality you bring to action. It is the inner posture from which life flows more smoothly, more intelligently, more compassionately. And in this understanding, the division between spiritual life and practical life dissolves. There is no longer a need to escape the world to find truth. Truth meets you where you are, in the middle of your commitments, your challenges, your daily routines. Every moment becomes a teacher, not because it is special, but because you are present. You come to see that being here now is not a small thing. It is the doorway to freedom. Not freedom from life, but freedom within it. The freedom to respond rather than react. The freedom to care without clinging. The freedom to live fully without losing yourself in the story of who you think you must be. And as this freedom becomes familiar, a quiet gratitude arises, not because life is perfect, but because it is real, and you are finally meeting it as you are, awake, grounded, whole. Living in the world, yet no longer lost within it. And this wholeness, once tasted, begins to guide you in ways that feel almost invisible, yet unmistakably real. You start to notice that life no longer asks you to push so hard, to brace yourself so tightly, to armor your heart against every possible outcome. There is a soft confidence that grows inside you, not the confidence of ego that demands recognition, but the confidence of alignment that needs no applause. You trust the rhythm of your own being. You move when it is time to move. You rest when it is time to rest. You no longer confuse constant motion with meaning. Presence teaches you the art of right timing. When you are no longer racing ahead of yourself, you sense when effort is useful and when it is unnecessary. You recognize that forcing outcomes often creates resistance, while allowing clarity to emerge invites cooperation from life itself. This is not passivity, it is intelligence. It is the wisdom of acting in harmony rather than in opposition. You may notice that the mind still visits you with its old habits, replaying conversations, forecasting disasters, measuring your worth against imagined standards. But now, these thoughts pass through a larger space. They no longer define the room. You watch them arise and dissolve like clouds drifting across an open sky. The sky does not argue with the clouds. It does not chase them away. It simply remains vast, and so do you. From this vastness, compassion deepens, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. You see more clearly that others are also navigating their own fears, their own conditioning, their own longing to be at peace. This understanding softens judgment. It does not mean you excuse harmful behavior, but you stop personalizing it. You respond from clarity rather than from wounded pride. You protect your boundaries without hardening your heart. There is a quiet humility that accompanies presence. You realize you do not need to have all the answers to be at ease. You do not need to control every variable to feel secure. Life becomes less about proving and more about participating. You engage fully, yet you allow room for mystery. You accept that not everything needs to be resolved immediately or even understood completely for it to be meaningful. In this acceptance, patience grows. You become less hurried, not because you have less to do, but because you are no longer fighting the moment you are in. You give your attention where it belongs, instead of scattering it across imagined timelines. You notice that when attention is whole, even simple actions carry a sense of depth and satisfaction. You are no longer half here and half somewhere else. You are here. And in being here, you begin to feel a subtle joy that does not depend on circumstances. It is not excitement or pleasure, though those may come and go. It is a gentle contentment, a quiet okayness with existence itself. You recognize this joy not as something you have achieved, but as something you have uncovered. It was always present, waiting beneath layers of striving and resistance. As this joy settles in, fear loses its authority. You still feel it at times. Fear is part of the human experience, but it no longer dictates your choices. You listen to it without obeying it. You thank it for its concern, and then you act from a deeper place. This is courage born of presence, not bravado. It is the courage to remain open in a world that often encourages contraction. You start to see that life is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to stop pretending to be who you are not. The effort you once poured into maintaining images, meeting expectations, and defending identities begins to fall away. What remains is simpler, quieter, and far more powerful. You show up as yourself, moment by moment, without apology, and this authenticity changes everything. Work becomes an expression rather than a burden. Relationships become a meeting rather than a transaction. Challenges become opportunities to practice awareness rather than evidence of failure. You stop asking, how can I get through this? and begin asking, how can I be present within this? The question itself shifts the experience eventually. You understand that presence is not something you turn on and off. It is your natural state when you stop interfering with it. It is who you are beneath the noise of becoming. Real life does not pull you away from this truth. It reveals where you have forgotten it. Each moment offers you a choice, not between spirituality and practicality, but between unconscious habit and conscious living. And so you continue, not striving for some final state of perfection, but returning again and again to now. Gently, patiently, without judgment, you live your life fully engaged, fully responsible, fully human, yet anchored in the quiet knowing that at the deepest level, nothing essential is missing. You are here, you are awake, and that is more than enough. And from this simple knowing, a deeper tenderness begins to infuse the way you move through your days. You no longer approach life as a problem to be solved, but as a relationship to be honored. Each moment becomes something you meet, not something you conquer. Even difficulty is no longer an enemy. It is a signal, a messenger, asking for attention rather than resistance. You learn to listen beneath the surface of events, to sense what life is quietly asking of you now. You start to notice that exhaustion often came not from the weight of responsibility, but from the inner struggle against what already was. The arguing with reality, the wishing it were different, the subtle refusal to accept the texture of the present moment. When that struggle dissolves, energy returns, not as a burst of adrenaline, but as a steady, sustainable vitality. You feel less depleted by life because you are no longer fighting it. Presence also invites a new relationship with effort. You realize that not all effort is equal. There is effort that feels tight, anxious, driven by fear of falling behind or being left out. And there is effort that feels clean, purposeful, guided by clarity. The actions may look similar on the outside, but inside they come from entirely different sources. One drains you, the other nourishes you. Presence teaches you how to tell the difference. As you become more attuned to this inner guidance, you begin to trust yourself in a new way. Not the self-image constructed by past successes or failures, but the deeper intelligence that has always been quietly orienting you toward growth. You see that you have survived moments you once believed would break you. You have adapted, learned, softened, and expanded in ways the fearful mind could not have predicted. This realization brings a grounded confidence that does not depend on circumstances lining up perfectly. With this confidence comes a gentler approach to decision-making. You stop demanding absolute certainty before taking a step. You understand that clarity often follows action, not the other way around. Presence allows you to take the next appropriate step without needing to see the entire path. You act from what feels aligned now, trusting that life will reveal what comes next when it is time. This trust does not make you careless. It makes you attentive. You are more responsive to feedback, more willing to adjust, less attached to being right. You learn to course correct without self-criticism. Mistakes become information rather than indictments. You meet them with curiosity instead of shame. This is how learning truly happens, when awareness replaces judgment. In this way, presence becomes deeply practical. It improves how you work, how you communicate, how you solve problems. Because when you are present, you are actually here. You are not diluted by mental noise or emotional residue from other moments. Your attention is focused, and focused attention is powerful. It brings precision to action and warmth to interaction. You may also notice that the need to rush diminishes, not because life slows down, but because you are no longer running from yourself. The urgency that once drove you was often fueled by an unconscious belief that something was lacking, that you needed to get somewhere else to finally be okay. Presence gently dismantles this belief. You discover that okayness is not a future achievement, it is a present recognition. From this recognition, gratitude begins to arise naturally. Not forced gratitude, not the kind that denies pain or difficulty, but a quiet appreciation for the fact of being alive at all. You feel it in small moments, the warmth of light, the rhythm of breath, the simple fact that you are here to witness this day. Gratitude grounds you. It brings you back into the body, back into the immediacy of experience. And as you live more from this grounded place, you realize that presence does not isolate you from others. It connects you more deeply. You are less defensive, less reactive, more available. You meet people where they are without needing them to be different in order for you to be at peace. This does not mean you tolerate what is harmful. It means you engage from clarity rather than from fear. Over time, the question you carry through life subtly changes. It is no longer, how do I manage everything, or how do I get ahead? It becomes, how can I bring awareness into this moment? And that single shift transforms everything it touches. Because awareness is the one thing that can be applied anywhere, at any time, without depletion. Eventually, you stop trying to balance presence and real life, because you see they were never separate. Presence is the way real life is lived consciously. Without it, you are merely surviving routines and reacting to pressures. With it, you are participating in the unfolding of your own existence with clarity and grace. And so you continue, not perfect, not finished, not above the messiness of being human, but awake within it. Returning again and again to this moment, letting life be exactly what it is, while allowing yourself to be exactly who you are. This is not an escape from life. It is finally being here for it. You're not failing. Even though it may feel that way when you wake up with a heaviness in your chest, when effort doesn't seem to match reward, when the path you thought would open before you instead curves back on itself and asks you to walk more slowly, more consciously, more honestly. What if this moment is not evidence of something going wrong, but an invitation to see more clearly what has always been trying to come through you? What if life is not pushing you away, but drawing you inward, asking you to remember something essential about who you are, before the noise of comparison, before the endless measuring, before the idea took root that your worth could be evaluated by outcomes, timelines, or the approval of others? There is a profound misunderstanding we carry, often silently, often painfully, that life is supposed to cooperate with our plans in order for us to feel validated. We believe that success is proof of alignment and that struggle is proof of error. Yet the deeper wisdom of existence operates on a very different principle. Life does not test you to see if you are worthy. Life tests you to reveal to you what you already are. And when you resist the test, when you label it as failure, when you argue with reality and say, this shouldn't be happening, you create suffering that has nothing to do with the event itself and everything to do with the story you are telling about it. You see, the ego thrives on judgment. It is constantly grading your life, assigning meaning to every delay, every rejection, every detour. It whispers that you are behind, that you missed your chance, that others have figured something out that you somehow failed to learn. The ego wants to keep you trapped in comparison because comparison is how it survives, but the soul does not compare. The soul observes, understands, and gently redirects. The soul knows that timing is not punishment and that waiting is not wasted. The soul understands that what looks like stagnation from the mind is often incubation from a higher intelligence. When a seed is placed in the soil, nothing appears to be happening for a long time. If you judge that process by surface evidence alone, you might conclude that the seed is defective or that the earth has rejected it. But something remarkable is taking place beneath the surface, invisible yet precise, guided by an intelligence that does not hurry and does not doubt. In the same way, there are seasons in your life when growth is occurring internally, quietly rearranging your priorities, dissolving old identities, strengthening roots that will one day support a much larger expression of who you are. To call that season failure is to misunderstand the nature of growth itself. You are not here to prove your worth to the world. You are here to remember your alignment with something far greater than the world's approval. Life tests you not with cruelty, but with clarity. It places you in situations that reveal where you are still attached to outcomes, where you are still trying to control rather than trust, where you are still believing that your value fluctuates based on results. Each test is a mirror. Each challenge asks, can you remain connected to your inner knowing even when the outer world feels uncertain? The mind wants guarantees. It wants clear signs, predictable rewards, linear progress. But life unfolds in spirals, not straight lines. You revisit themes, lessons, relationships, and emotions, not because you failed to learn them the first time, but because you are being invited to meet them from a higher level of awareness. The same situation can feel unbearable at one stage of consciousness and deeply instructive at another. What changes is not the event, but your relationship to it. There is a quiet power that emerges when you stop interpreting every difficulty as a personal flaw, when you no longer ask, "What is wrong with me?" and instead ask, "What is this teaching me about where I am still resisting my own truth?" Resistance is exhausting. It is the inner argument with reality that drains your energy and convinces you that life is happening to you rather than for you. Acceptance, on the other hand, is not resignation, it is alignment. It is the recognition that this moment, exactly as it is, contains information you need in order to evolve. Life tests you by removing what you have outgrown. It tests you by delaying what you are not yet ready to receive. It tests you by placing you in discomfort so that you can discover a strength that would otherwise remain dormant. And the ego interprets all of this as loss, as failure, as evidence of inadequacy. But the soul recognizes it as refinement. Just as gold is purified by fire, your consciousness is clarified by challenge, not to break you, but to free you from illusions that no longer serve you. Consider how often you measure yourself by external markers, by achievements, titles, relationships, or milestones that society has decided are meaningful. These markers can be useful, but they are not definitive. They cannot tell the story of your inner life, your courage, your resilience, your capacity for compassion, or the quiet integrity with which you continue to show up even when no one is watching. When life strips away external validation, it is inviting you to anchor your sense of self in something far more stable than circumstances. There is an intelligence moving through you that does not panic when things fall apart. It does not rush to label experiences as good or bad. It understands that endings create space, that confusion precedes clarity, and that uncertainty is often the doorway to deeper faith. Faith not as blind belief, but as an inner knowing that you are held by a wisdom that exceeds your personal plans. When you trust this intelligence, you stop fighting the current and begin to move with it. You realize that the river knows where it is going, even when the path twists and narrows. You are not behind in life. There is no universal schedule you are failing to meet. Time, as the ego understands it, is a psychological construct. The soul operates outside of urgency. It knows that each experience arrives precisely when you are capable of integrating it, even if your mind insists otherwise. When something does not work out, it is not proof that you are unworthy. It is often proof that your soul is guiding you away from a path that would have kept you small, distracted, or disconnected from your deeper purpose. Life tests you by asking you to let go of identities that once felt necessary. You may have defined yourself by being the one who pleases, the one who sacrifices, the one who endures silently. And when those roles no longer sustain you, discomfort arises. The ego resists this discomfort because it equates familiarity with safety. But growth requires you to release old self-images, even the ones that once earned you approval. In doing so, you may feel temporarily unmoored, unsure of who you are becoming. This is not failure. This is transformation in motion. There is a subtle yet profound shift that occurs when you stop asking life to be easier and start asking yourself to be more present. Presence changes everything. When you are fully here, not projecting fear into the future or replaying regret from the past, you discover that this moment is workable, breath by breath, choice by choice. You regain access to your inner authority. You realize that peace is not something you earn after everything falls into place. Peace is something you practice now, regardless of conditions. The ego says, "I will be at peace when I succeed." The soul says, "I succeed when I am at peace." This reversal is life-altering. When your sense of well-being is no longer dependent on outcomes, you become resilient. You stop outsourcing your happiness to circumstances you cannot control. You begin to act from inspiration rather than fear, from clarity rather than desperation. And paradoxically, it is from this state of inner alignment that meaningful accomplishments naturally arise. Life tests you to see if you will remember who you are when the familiar structures dissolve. Will you collapse into self-judgment, or will you lean into self-compassion? Will you cling to old narratives, or will you allow yourself to be redefined by a deeper truth? Every challenge carries this question. And each time you respond with awareness rather than reactivity, you pass the test not because the difficulty disappears, but because it no longer defines you. You are a participant in a vast, intelligent unfolding. Your life is not a random sequence of events, but a coherent process of awakening. Even the moments that feel chaotic or painful are contributing to this process. When you trust that there is meaning beyond what you can immediately see, you relax your grip on control. You allow life to surprise you. You make room for possibilities that could not have emerged from your original plan. The greatest freedom comes from releasing the belief that you must constantly prove yourself. You do not need to earn your right to exist, to rest, to feel joy, or to explore new directions. Your worth is intrinsic. It was not granted by success, and it cannot be revoked by difficulty. When you internalize this truth, tests lose their power to intimidate you. They become conversations rather than verdicts. Life will continue to test you, not because you are lacking, but because you are expanding. Each test refines your awareness, strengthens your intuition, and deepens your trust in the unseen forces that support you. And one day, often without dramatic fanfare, you will look back and realize that what you once called failure was actually preparation. What felt like being lost was actually being redirected. What seemed like an ending was a necessary clearing. You are not failing. You are being shaped. You are being asked to step out of the small story of inadequacy and into the larger truth of your spiritual identity. You are being reminded that you are more than your thoughts, more than your circumstances, more than the temporary roles you play. You are an expression of a creative intelligence that does not make mistakes. When you meet life's tests with curiosity instead of condemnation, with presence instead of panic, something extraordinary happens. You stop fighting yourself. You begin to listen, and in that listening, you hear a quiet, steady voice within you saying, "Trust this process. You are exactly where you need to be." And as you continue to listen to that inner voice, something subtle begins to soften inside you. The urgency to fix everything at once loosens its grip. You notice that the pressure you've been carrying was never imposed by life itself, but by the belief that you were somehow late to your own becoming. When that belief dissolves, even slightly, space opens up for grace. Grace does not arrive with fireworks or declarations. It arrives quietly, as relief, as permission. As the gentle realization that you do not need to wrestle your way into alignment, you simply need to stop resisting the truth that has always been present. There is a remarkable freedom in recognizing that life is not asking you to be perfect. It is asking you to be honest. Honest about what no longer fits. Honest about what you are afraid to release. Honest about the difference between who you have been performing as and who you are longing to become. Tests often appear when you are living from an outdated self-concept, when your outer life no longer matches your inner evolution. The discomfort you feel is not a signal to retreat, but a signal to realign. You begin to see that many of the obstacles you encounter are not barriers, but thresholds. They ask a single question again and again. Will you choose fear or will you choose trust? Fear insists that you tighten your grip, defend your position, and cling to what is familiar. Trust invites you to relax into the unknown, to take one conscious step without demanding to see the entire staircase. Trust is not passive. It is an active surrender, a deliberate decision to cooperate with a wisdom that operates beyond the limited scope of the thinking mind. When you stop interpreting uncertainty as danger, curiosity naturally arises. Curiosity shifts your energy from contraction to expansion. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is trying to emerge through me now?" This question transforms the experience of being tested into an experience of being initiated. You are no longer a victim of circumstances. You are a participant in your own awakening. There is a rhythm to life that becomes audible when you quiet the mental noise. You notice that things fall away in waves, not all at once. That clarity comes in layers, not sudden revelations. This rhythm is intelligent. It respects your capacity. It does not overwhelm you with more than you can integrate. Even when events feel intense, there is a precise calibration taking place beneath the surface. Nothing is random. Nothing is wasted. You may discover that some of the hardest tests involve letting go of how you thought your life should look. Expectations can become invisible cages when you mistake them for truth. You grieve the versions of yourself you imagined you would become by now, the timelines you quietly committed to, the outcomes you believed would validate your effort. Grief is not weakness, it is honesty. And when you allow yourself to feel it without judgment, it passes through you, leaving behind a deeper clarity about what truly matters. What truly matters is not whether you meet external benchmarks, but whether you remain connected to your inner guidance. This guidance speaks through feelings of resonance and dissonance, through a sense of ease or contraction, through moments of quiet knowing that cannot be logically explained. When life tests you, it is often amplifying these signals, making it impossible to ignore what you have been tolerating, postponing, or denying. The test is not meant to punish you, but to wake you up. As you awaken, you begin to notice how much energy you once spent trying to manage appearances, trying to look successful, composed, certain. There is a profound relief in letting that performance end. Authenticity is effortless because it requires no maintenance. When you stop pretending to have it all figured out, you give yourself permission to be guided moment by moment. You become teachable again, open again, receptive to insights that were previously drowned out by the need to appear confident. Life tests you to see if you will trust your inner compass, even when the outer map is unclear. This trust grows incrementally. Each time you choose alignment over approval, presence over prediction, compassion over criticism, the connection strengthens. You feel less reactive, more centered, less dependent on outcomes to determine your sense of worth. You realize that peace is not fragile, it is resilient when it is rooted within. There is a point, often unnoticed at first, when the question shifts. You stop asking, when will this test end? And start asking, who am I becoming through this? This shift marks a turning inward that changes everything. You are no longer waiting for life to give you permission to feel whole. You are claiming that wholeness now, regardless of circumstances. And from this place, the outer world begins to reorganize in ways you could not have forced. Life responds to inner alignment far more readily than it responds to effort alone. When your actions are infused with clarity rather than anxiety, they carry a different energy. Opportunities appear without strain. Decisions feel cleaner, less conflicted. You begin to trust yourself not because you have all the answers, but because you know how to listen. This trust is the true reward of every test you have endured. You start to understand that the most meaningful progress is often invisible to others. It happens in the quiet moments when you choose patience instead of panic, honesty instead of avoidance, forgiveness instead of resentment. These choices recalibrate your entire experience of being alive. They free you from the illusion that your life is something to be fixed and reveal it as something to be lived consciously. And in this conscious living, you recognize a deeper truth. You are not separate from the intelligence that guides the universe. You are an expression of it. The same force that orchestrates the unfolding of galaxies is present in your breath, your intuition, your capacity to love and to learn. When life tests you, it is this intelligence inviting you to remember your connection to it, to move beyond the small self that feels threatened and into the expanded awareness that knows it is supported. You are not being measured against an external standard. You are being invited into a deeper relationship with yourself. Each test peels away another layer of illusion, another false belief about who you need to be in order to belong. And what remains when the layers fall away is something remarkably simple and profoundly strong: your natural state of clarity, compassion, and trust. So when the next challenge arises, and it will, meet it with a gentler gaze. Breathe into it. Ask what it is revealing rather than what it is taking away. Remember that you are not failing your way through life, you are awakening your way through it. And every test, no matter how uncomfortable, is guiding you back to the same quiet truth. You are supported, you are learning, and you are exactly where you are meant to be. And as this understanding settles more deeply within you, you may notice that the old urge to rush ahead begins to lose its authority. The compulsion to arrive somewhere else, to become someone else before you grant yourself permission to breathe, slowly dissolves. You realize that the idea of arrival was always an illusion created by the mind, a promise that fulfillment lives in a future moment rather than in the awareness you are cultivating right now. Life was never withholding peace from you, it was waiting for you to stop postponing it. There is a sacred patience woven into the fabric of existence. It does not pressure the flower to bloom before its season, nor does it shame the night for lasting longer than expected. Yet we often deny ourselves this same patience. We scold our own unfolding. We judge our pauses. We treat rest as weakness and uncertainty as incompetence. Life tests you by asking a simple but radical question. Can you allow yourself the same compassion you instinctively grant to the natural world? When you do, something begins to heal at a very deep level. You stop seeing yourself as a problem to be solved and start experiencing yourself as a process to be honored. You understand that growth is not a straight ascent, but a series of expansions and contractions, each one essential. The contraction pulls you inward so you can listen more closely. The expansion carries you outward so you can express what you've learned. Both are necessary. Neither is a mistake. You may notice that the moments which once triggered fear now invite reflection. The silence that once felt empty now feels spacious. The unanswered questions that once tormented you now gently guide you toward humility. Humility not as self-diminishment, but as alignment with truth, the truth that you do not need to control life in order to cooperate with it. Control is the ego's attempt to feel safe in an uncertain world. Trust is the soul's recognition that safety comes from connection, not domination. Life tests you by disrupting familiar patterns so you can see them clearly. When routines break, when relationships shift, when identities dissolve, you are given a rare opportunity to observe who you are without the props you once relied on. This can feel unsettling, even frightening, but beneath that discomfort is a powerful invitation to discover the part of you that remains steady regardless of circumstances. This part is not loud. It does not argue or defend itself. It simply knows. As you spend more time resting in this knowing, you become less reactive to external fluctuations. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not define you. Success does not intoxicate you. Failure does not devastate you. You begin to live from an inner reference point that is stable, calm, and quietly confident. This is not detachment from life. It is deep engagement without attachment. You care fully, but you cling lightly. There is a remarkable shift that occurs when you stop asking life to make sense according to your preferences. Meaning reveals itself not through force, but through presence. When you stay present with what is unfolding, even when it is uncomfortable, layers of understanding gradually emerge. You see how past challenges refined your discernment, how disappointments redirected your values, how moments of loss stripped away illusions and revealed what could never be taken from you. You begin to trust that even confusion has a purpose. Confusion humbles the intellect and opens the door to intuition. It creates a pause in habitual thinking, allowing new insights to surface. When you no longer rush to escape confusion, it transforms from a threat into a teacher. Life tests you to see if you will remain open when clarity has not yet arrived, if you will stay curious instead of cynical. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your relationship with effort changes. You still take action, but it no longer feels frantic or desperate. Action arises from alignment rather than anxiety. You move because it feels true, not because you are trying to outrun fear. In this state, even small steps feel significant because they are taken consciously. You understand that the quality of your presence matters far more than the quantity of your achievements. You may find yourself releasing old resentments, not because anyone apologized or circumstances changed, but because you no longer want to carry their weight. Resentment requires constant attention. It keeps you tethered to the past, rehearsing stories that reinforce separation. Life tests you by showing you how heavy this burden is until you are ready to set it down. Forgiveness then emerges naturally, not as a moral obligation, but as an act of self-liberation. As forgiveness deepens, compassion expands. You see that others, like you, are navigating their own tests, often unconsciously. Their behavior reflects their level of awareness, not your worth. This understanding softens judgment and creates space for empathy. You stop taking everything personally because you recognize that most actions arise from fear or confusion, not malice. In this recognition, your heart becomes lighter, more available, more free. Life tests you not to harden you, but to open you. Each challenge stretches your capacity to love, to trust, to remain centered amid change. You are not meant to emerge from these tests armored and rigid. You are meant to emerge resilient and flexible, grounded yet expansive. Strength, in its truest form, is not resistance, it is responsiveness. And there comes a moment, often quiet, often unannounced, when you realize that you are no longer waiting for life to begin. You are living it fully, consciously. You are participating rather than postponing. The tests may continue, but they no longer threaten your sense of self. They arrive as reminders to return to presence, to realign with truth, to listen more deeply. In this way, life becomes less of a battle and more of a dialogue. You speak through your choices. Life responds through experience. And in this ongoing conversation, you come to trust that you are being guided, moment by moment, toward greater clarity and inner freedom. You are not failing. You never were. You are learning how to live from the inside out, and that learning is the most meaningful success there is. There is a quiet truth that lives beneath all the noise of your life, beneath the rushing, beneath the planning, beneath the endless list of things that you believe must be done before you can finally rest, before you can finally feel whole, before you can finally feel close to God. And that truth is this: God is not waiting for you at the end of your busyness. God is present in the very moment you stop resisting the now. You do not encounter the divine by adding another task to your schedule, by striving harder, by becoming more perfect, or by someday reaching a place where life finally slows down. You encounter God the instant you remember how to be still while life is moving. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the absence of inner resistance. It is the gentle decision to stop arguing with the present moment and to let life be exactly what it is while you remain rooted in awareness. When you live this way, even the busiest day becomes a sanctuary. Even the most ordinary moment becomes holy ground. You see, most people believe that encountering God requires retreating from the world, withdrawing from responsibility, or escaping into silence somewhere far away from daily life. And while there is value in solitude, the deeper truth is that God does not live in separation from your life. God lives in the awareness with which you experience it. God is not found in the future version of you who is calmer, more disciplined, or more spiritual. God is found in the awareness that is noticing this very breath, this very heartbeat, this very moment of being alive. The soul does not rush. The ego rushes. The ego believes that peace is earned, that worthiness must be proven, and that connection comes after accomplishment. The soul knows that peace is your nature, worthiness is your essence, and connection is never absent. When you begin to live from the soul instead of the ego, your entire relationship with time changes. You stop chasing moments and start inhabiting them. Encountering God daily begins with a simple shift in perception. You stop looking for God as an object outside of yourself and begin recognizing God as the awareness within you that is aware. This awareness is not impressed by your achievements, nor diminished by your failures. It simply observes with compassion, patience, and infinite presence. When you align with this awareness, you are aligning with the divine. Think about how often your mind is somewhere other than where your body is. You are eating while thinking about tomorrow, listening while preparing your response, walking while replaying yesterday. In these moments, life is happening, but you are not truly there. And where you are not present, you cannot experience God. Not because God is absent, but because awareness is. To encounter God in the midst of a busy day is to gently return to presence again and again without judgment. It is to notice the sensation of your feet touching the ground, the rhythm of your breath, the sound of your own voice when you speak. It is to allow these simple experiences to anchor you back into the now. Presence is the doorway through which the divine is always entering your life. There is a sacred intelligence that flows through all things. It breathes the breath you are breathing. It beats the heart you are listening to right now. You do not need to summon it. You cannot lose it. You can only forget that it is there. And forgetting happens whenever you identify exclusively with your thoughts, your fears, your worries, and your sense of control. Control is one of the ego's greatest illusions. It whispers that if you can just manage everything perfectly, you will finally feel safe. But safety does not come from control. Peace comes from trust. Trust is not passive resignation. It is an active alignment with a higher intelligence that knows how to move life forward without your constant interference. When you let go of the need to control outcomes, you create space for grace. When you release the belief that everything depends on you, you open yourself to the realization that everything is being supported by something far greater than you. This is not weakness. This is spiritual maturity. Stress is not caused by what you are doing. Stress is caused by the belief that you are alone in doing it. Fear is not caused by uncertainty. Fear is caused by forgetting your connection to the source of all certainty. When you remember that you are not separate from the intelligence that created worlds, you begin to relax into life rather than brace against it. Encountering God daily means learning to pause, even briefly, and ask yourself, who is aware of this moment? Not what is happening, not what needs to be fixed, but who is aware. That awareness is the meeting place between you and the divine. It is the still point in the turning world. You may notice that when you slow down internally, even for a few seconds, something shifts. Your shoulders soften, your breath deepens, your thoughts lose some of their urgency. This is not accidental. This is remembrance. This is you returning home to yourself. God is not found in complexity. God is found in simplicity, in the space between breaths, in the silence between thoughts, in the awareness that notices the mind without becoming lost in it. When you live from this place, your actions become more intentional, your words more compassionate, and your presence more healing. The soul always knows what the mind is struggling to figure out. The soul knows that you are already enough, already whole, already guided. The soul does not speak in words. It speaks in feelings of alignment, ease, and quiet certainty. When something feels expansive, peaceful, and loving, you are in harmony with higher consciousness. When something feels contracted, heavy, and fearful, you are listening to the ego. Aligning your thoughts with higher consciousness does not mean eliminating negative thoughts. It means not believing everything you think. It means recognizing that thoughts are events in the mind, not definitions of reality. You are the sky, not the clouds. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise and pass away. As you practice this perspective, you begin to experience a profound freedom. You stop being controlled by your inner dialogue. You stop reacting automatically. You begin responding consciously. This is where true power lives. Not in force, not in domination, but in presence. Living with purpose does not require a grand mission or dramatic destiny. Purpose is revealed in how you show up to each moment. When you bring presence to washing dishes, listening to a loved one, answering an email, or walking down the street, you are living your purpose. Purpose is not about what you do, it is about the energy with which you do it. Peace is not something you achieve after everything is resolved. Peace is something you choose in the midst of unresolved circumstances. It is the decision to trust that life is unfolding with intelligence, even when you do not understand the plan. Trust does not mean that you will never feel fear. It means that you will not let fear be your guide. It means that when fear arises, you meet it with awareness instead of resistance. You allow it to pass through without building a story around it. The more you practice encountering God in ordinary moments, the more you realize that there are no ordinary moments. Everything becomes infused with meaning. Everything becomes an invitation to wake up. You begin to see that God is not separate from your breath, your thoughts, your body, or your life. God is the life within your life. God is the awareness that is reading these words right now. And when you live from this knowing, something extraordinary happens. You stop seeking peace and start radiating it. You stop searching for love and start expressing it. You stop asking life for permission to be whole and realize that wholeness was never absent. This is how you encounter God daily, not by escaping your life, but by inhabiting it fully. Not by striving for perfection, but by resting in awareness. Not by doing more, but by remembering who you are beneath everything you do. And as you continue to return to this truth again and again, even on your busiest days, you will discover that the divine has been walking with you all along, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to notice. And as this remembering deepens, you begin to sense that what you once called your life is not a series of disconnected events you must manage, but a living, breathing movement of intelligence expressing itself through you. You start to feel that you are not standing in life like a worker pushing against a heavy door, but floating within it like a leaf carried by a current that knows exactly where it is going. The tension you once carried in your body, the constant readiness to defend, to prove, to hurry, slowly loosens its grip. Not because your circumstances suddenly become perfect, but because your relationship to them transforms. You realize that the deepest exhaustion you have known was never physical, it was spiritual fatigue. It was the weariness that comes from believing you must do everything alone, that you must think your way through every uncertainty, that you must earn your place in a universe that already welcomed you into existence. And in this realization, something softens. Something ancient within you exhales for the first time in years. There is a quiet courage that arises when you stop fighting the present moment. It is not the loud bravery of forcing outcomes or conquering obstacles, but the steady strength of trust. Trust that life is not happening to you, but through you. Trust that the same intelligence that orchestrates the movement of galaxies also guides the unfolding of your days. Trust that you do not need to see the entire staircase to take the next step. When you encounter God in this way, daily, gently, without ceremony, you begin to notice how often grace has been speaking to you in whispers you once ignored, in the pause before reacting, in the sudden calm that appears in the middle of chaos, in the intuitive nudge that guides you away from harm and toward understanding. These moments were always there. What changes is your willingness to listen. You start to understand that stillness is not something you schedule. It is something you bring. You bring it into conversations by listening fully instead of preparing your reply. You bring it into your work by focusing on one task at a time with presence instead of pressure. You bring it into your relationships by seeing others not as problems to be fixed, but as souls on their own journey of remembering. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your outer life begins to reflect this inner alignment. Decisions become clearer. Conflicts lose their charge. You stop forcing answers and start receiving insight. You discover that when you are aligned with higher consciousness, effort gives way to flow. Life moves with you instead of against you. This is where fear begins to dissolve, not because you have conquered it, but because you no longer feed it with belief. Fear thrives on the illusion of separation. It whispers that you are alone, unsupported, and vulnerable in a hostile world. But awareness reveals a deeper truth. You have never been separate from the source of life. You have never been abandoned. You have never been without guidance. When fear arises now, you meet it as you would meet a frightened child, with compassion rather than resistance. You allow it to be present without letting it take the wheel. You remember that fear is a visitor, not your identity. And in that remembering, fear loses its authority. There is a profound humility that comes with this way of living. You stop needing to be right. You stop needing to control how others see you. You stop measuring your worth by comparison or achievement. You begin to live from a quieter place, where validation is no longer sought externally, because it is felt internally. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is engagement without attachment. You find yourself acting with greater kindness, not because you are trying to be spiritual, but because kindness feels natural when you recognize yourself in others. You find yourself speaking more truthfully, not to impress or persuade, but to express what feels aligned. You find yourself letting go more easily because you trust that what is meant for you cannot be lost. Living this way does not mean that challenges disappear. It means that challenges no longer define you. You experience them as waves rather than walls, movements rather than obstacles. You allow them to shape you without hardening you. You learn from them without carrying them as burdens. And in the midst of all this, something sacred unfolds. Your days become infused with a quiet reverence. You notice beauty where you once saw only routine. You sense meaning where you once felt monotony. You realize that every moment, no matter how small, is an opportunity to remember who you are. This remembrance is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It arrives softly, like dawn. It is the gentle awareness that you are not a fragment in a broken world, but an expression of wholeness in motion. It is the knowing that you are not here to fix yourself, but to express yourself as love, as presence, as consciousness in form. And so you continue day after day, not striving for enlightenment, but living from awareness. Not searching for God, but recognizing God in the texture of your own experience, in the breath that sustains you, in the silence that holds you, in the intelligence that moves you forward even when you do not know where you are going. This is the rhythm of a life lived in alignment. This is the quiet miracle of encountering God daily, even on your busiest days. Not as something separate from you, not as something you must earn or achieve, but as the living presence that has always been and will always be the truth of who you are. And as this way of being settles more deeply into you, you begin to sense a subtle but unmistakable shift in how you move through the world. You are no longer rushing toward life as if it were perpetually ahead of you. You are standing within it. You are breathing with it. You are allowing it to reveal itself moment by moment, without demanding that it hurry to meet your expectations. There is a profound relief in this surrender, though surrender is often misunderstood. It is not giving up. It is giving over the illusion that you were ever meant to carry the weight of existence on your shoulders. It is recognizing that life has been living itself long before you arrived, and it will continue long after, guided by an intelligence far more expansive than the thinking mind. When you surrender in this way, you are not shrinking, you are expanding into truth. You start to notice how often the mind tries to pull you back into old habits of urgency and worry. It reminds you of unfinished tasks, imagined futures, unresolved pasts, and instead of fighting the mind, you simply notice it. You watch these thoughts arise and dissolve like ripples on the surface of a vast ocean. You do not dive into them. You remain the depth that holds them. This is where freedom lives, not in controlling your thoughts, but in realizing you are not confined by them, not in silencing the mind, but in no longer mistaking its noise for your identity. The more you rest in awareness, the more you feel an inner spaciousness that nothing can threaten. This spaciousness becomes your refuge, your center, your home. And from this center, you begin to respond to life with a gentleness that surprises even you. Situations that once triggered frustration now invite curiosity. Delays that once felt intolerable now become opportunities to pause. Even discomfort carries a different quality because it is no longer layered with resistance. You allow experience to move through you rather than lodge within you. This is the alchemy of presence. Nothing is wasted. Everything becomes part of your awakening. Every interaction becomes a mirror. Every challenge becomes a teacher. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you become more available to its wisdom. You begin to sense that God is not a distant authority watching from afar, but an intimate presence participating in every moment of your existence. God is the stillness beneath your thoughts. God is the intelligence shaping your intuition. God is the love that arises spontaneously when you stop protecting your heart. In this knowing, prayer changes. It is no longer a request made from fear or lack. It becomes a state of listening, a quiet communion, a wordless recognition. You stop asking life to be different and start aligning yourself with what is already unfolding. And in this alignment, answers arrive not as explanations, but as clarity. You discover that peace does not require ideal conditions. Peace requires presence. And presence is always available. No matter how crowded your schedule, no matter how complex your responsibilities, there is always this breath, this awareness, this moment. And this moment is where God lives. As you live from this truth, your sense of purpose becomes less about achieving and more about embodying. You are here to embody peace in a restless world. You are here to embody trust in an anxious culture. You are here to embody love in a time when fear has become habitual. This is not a burden. It is a calling that arises naturally from awareness. And you begin to see how deeply interconnected all things are, how your inner state influences the space around you, how calm becomes contagious, how presence invites presence. Without preaching, without convincing, without effort, your way of being becomes a quiet offering to the world. There is a humility in this that dissolves the ego's need to be special. You do not need to stand above or apart. You belong. You always have. You are an expression of the same life that animates everyone you meet. And in this recognition, compassion becomes effortless. Even when you falter, even when you forget, even when old patterns resurface, there is kindness toward yourself. You no longer condemn your humanity. You understand that awakening is not a straight line, but a gentle remembering that happens again and again. Each return to presence is enough. Each moment of awareness is complete. And so you continue, not with urgency, not with striving, but with devotion to the present moment. You meet each day not as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be lived. You trust that whatever arises is part of your unfolding. You trust that you are being guided, even when the path is not clear. This trust becomes the foundation of a life lived in quiet confidence. Not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in alignment. Not confidence in control, but confidence in connection. You know that no matter what unfolds, you will meet it with awareness. And awareness is the great healer. In this way, encountering God daily is no longer something you practice. It becomes who you are. A way of seeing, a way of listening, a way of being present to the miracle of existence as it reveals itself through you, breath by breath, moment by moment, endlessly unfolding in grace. And in this living awareness, something subtle yet profound begins to happen. You stop measuring your days by what you accomplished and start feeling them by how deeply you were present. Time loosens its grip on you. Hours no longer feel like enemies chasing you forward, but spacious landscapes you move through with intention. You realize that when you are fully here, time does not oppress you, it serves you. You begin to sense that the rush you once called necessity was never required by life itself. It was required by a mind afraid of falling behind, afraid of missing out, afraid of not being enough. And as that fear dissolves, you discover a deeper rhythm moving beneath the surface of everything, a rhythm that does not hurry yet never wastes a moment. When you attune yourself to this rhythm, life feels less like pressure and more like participation. There is a gentleness that enters your nervous system. Your body, which has carried years of unconscious tension, begins to trust again. Muscles soften, breathing deepens. You feel safer in your own skin, not because the world has become predictable, but because you have become anchored not to circumstances, but to presence. And presence does not collapse when circumstances change. You start noticing how often you used to abandon yourself in order to keep moving, how often you ignored intuition to satisfy urgency, how often you betrayed inner truth to maintain momentum. And now, instead of judging those moments, you meet them with compassion. You understand that you were doing the best you could with the level of awareness you had, and that understanding frees you. Forgiveness, you realize, is not a moral obligation, it is a release of inner weight. As forgiveness deepens, not just toward others, but toward yourself, you feel lighter. Old emotional debts dissolve, resentments lose their story. The past, which once felt like a place you were trapped inside, becomes a teacher you can thank and leave behind. You no longer carry yesterday into today as evidence against yourself. You carry it as wisdom. And in this lightness, joy begins to appear, not the fleeting excitement tied to outcomes, but a quiet joy that arises without reason, a joy that feels like recognition, like remembering something essential you had forgotten. This joy does not shout, it hums. It lives in simple moments, the way sunlight touches a wall, the sound of your own laughter, the stillness that follows a deep breath. You realize that joy is not a reward for a life well lived. It is the natural expression of a life lived consciously. You stop postponing happiness. You stop saying, when this is over, then I will feel peace. You understand that peace is not the result of life cooperating with you, it is the result of you cooperating with life. You stop negotiating with the present. You stop holding your breath, waiting for permission to relax. You give yourself that permission now. And something extraordinary happens when you do. Life responds, not always by changing externally, but by revealing itself differently. Opportunities appear where resistance once blocked perception. Solutions arise where anxiety once narrowed vision. You see more clearly because fear is no longer fogging the lens through which you view reality. You begin to trust the quiet impulses that arise from within, the subtle sense of when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait, when to move forward and when to rest. You recognize that intuition is not mysterious, it is simply intelligence, unhindered by fear. And the more you honor it, the stronger it becomes. This trust extends into uncertainty, especially uncertainty. You stop demanding guarantees from life. You stop needing to know exactly how things will unfold in order to move forward. You understand that faith is not certainty about outcomes, it is certainty about presence. It is knowing that no matter what arises, you will meet it with awareness, and awareness is enough. You realize that the divine is not something you occasionally connect with during moments of calm, but the very field in which all moments arise, even confusion, even doubt, even pain. Nothing is excluded from this presence. Nothing is outside of it. And this realization dissolves the last traces of separation you once felt. You no longer divide life into sacred and mundane. You no longer wait for special moments to feel connected. Everything becomes part of the conversation. Everything becomes prayer, not spoken prayer, but lived prayer. Attention itself becomes devotion. Presence becomes praise. And as you live this way, you sense that you are not here to escape the world, but to inhabit it fully, consciously, lovingly. You are here to be a point where awareness becomes human, where the infinite experiences itself in form. This is not a burden. It is a privilege. It is the quiet miracle of being alive. You walk forward now with a different posture, not leaning into the future, not dragging the past, but standing upright in the now. You trust the ground beneath you. You trust the intelligence within you. You trust the unfolding that carries you. And in this trust, you encounter God not as a concept, not as a distant force, but as the living presence breathing through your life, moment by moment, gently reminding you that you were never meant to rush your way to peace. You were meant to remember it. There comes a quiet moment in every life, often unnoticed, often uncelebrated, when the soul begins to whisper a truth the ego has spent years trying to silence. It does not shout, it does not argue, it simply waits. And if you listen closely, beneath the noise of obligations, expectations, disappointments, and ambitions, you may hear it saying something both unsettling and liberating at the same time. You were never meant to be controlled by the world you see. Most of us have been trained, almost from birth, to believe the opposite. We were taught that happiness is conditional, that peace is something earned, that fulfillment arrives only when circumstances finally align, when the right person stays, when the right job appears, when the body looks a certain way, when the past stops hurting, when the future feels secure. And so we spend our lives waiting for life to behave differently so that we can finally feel whole. But the soul knows something the conditioned mind has forgotten. True freedom does not arrive when life changes, it arrives when you do. Look closely at how often your inner state rises and falls with external events. A compliment lifts you, a criticism deflates you, a win makes you feel worthy, a loss convinces you that something is wrong with you. The mind keeps score, constantly measuring, comparing, judging, using the outer world as a mirror to decide who you are allowed to be inside. And without realizing it, you hand over the authority of your peace to forces that were never designed to carry that responsibility. This is not freedom. This is quiet captivity. The ego thrives on this arrangement. It lives in reaction. It survives on labels, roles, and outcomes. It says, I am successful because I achieved this. I am broken because I lost that. I am important because they noticed me. I am invisible because they didn't. The ego is always negotiating with the world, always bargaining for validation, always afraid that if conditions shift, it will disappear. And in a way, it's right, because the ego does disappear when you stop letting the outside world define your inner state. But you do not. There is a deeper self within you, calm, observant, steady, that was never dependent on circumstances to begin with. It was present before your first success and remains untouched by your perceived failures. It does not need applause to feel real. It does not need approval to feel safe. It does not panic when plans fall apart, because it understands something profoundly simple. Life is happening through you, not to you. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to move through the world without constantly asking, is this enough? Am I enough? Have I done enough? Imagine responding to life instead of reacting to it. Imagine standing in the middle of uncertainty and feeling an unshakable sense of okayness, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer demanding that perfection be a prerequisite for peace. This is where true freedom begins. Freedom does not mean the absence of challenges. It means the absence of inner resistance to what is. When you stop arguing with reality, when you stop insisting that the present moment should be something other than what it is, you reclaim an extraordinary amount of energy. And that energy, once trapped in resentment, fear, and regret, returns to you as clarity, compassion, and quiet strength. So much suffering comes not from what happens, but from the story we tell ourselves about what happens. The mind replays the past, edits it, magnifies it, and then drags it into the present as if it were still alive. But the past is not happening now. It exists only as thought. And thoughts, no matter how convincing, are not commands. They are invitations, ones you are free to decline. You do not heal by fixing the past. You heal by releasing your identification with it. When you stop introducing yourself to the world through your wounds, something remarkable occurs. You begin to experience life directly without the filter of old pain. You realize that you are not the one who was hurt, you are the one who noticed the hurt. You are not the emotion, you are the awareness in which the emotion appears and disappears. And awareness, by its nature, is untouched. This is why no external condition can give you lasting peace. And it is also why no external condition can take it away unless you believe it has the authority to do so. Notice how different life feels when you no longer demand that it validate you. When a plan fails, you don't collapse, you adapt. When someone disagrees with you, you don't shrink, you listen. When something ends, you don't cling, you allow. This is not indifference. It is alignment. It is the deep understanding that your worth is not negotiated in the marketplace of outcomes. You are not born to be managed by circumstances. You were born to experience them fully, consciously, and without losing yourself in the process. There is a profound shift that occurs when you stop asking, what does this mean about me? And start asking, what is this here to teach me? The first question traps you in ego. The second opens you to wisdom. One keeps you small. The other returns you to your natural state of expansion. And expansion is your true nature. You are not here to control life, nor are you here to be controlled by it. You are here to cooperate with it, to move with its rhythms, to trust its intelligence, and to remember that the same force organizing the stars is quietly breathing your lungs and beating your heart. When you truly grasp this, the need to dominate, defend, and define yourself begins to dissolve. You stop fighting the river and start floating with awareness. This does not mean you stop setting intentions or taking action. It means your actions are no longer fueled by fear. You move not because you are incomplete, but because you are inspired. You create not to prove your worth, but to express it. And when outcomes differ from expectations, you don't interpret it as rejection, you recognize it as redirection. The soul never panics when things don't go according to plan. Only the ego does. As you begin to release your attachment to external validation, you may notice something unexpected, a deep sense of inner authority emerging. You no longer wait for permission to feel peaceful. You no longer postpone joy until conditions improve. You realize that peace is not something you find, it is something you allow. An allowance is an act of courage. It takes courage to stop blaming the world for how you feel. It takes courage to say, I choose my inner state regardless of circumstances. But in that choice lies liberation. Because when you reclaim responsibility for your inner world, you are no longer at the mercy of the outer one. Life will still bring change. It will still bring loss and uncertainty and moments of discomfort, but it will no longer define you. It will inform you, shape you, refine you, but it will not own you. You begin to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. And in that orientation, something extraordinary happens. The world may not change immediately, but your experience of it does. And often that is enough. Because when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at truly do begin to change, not through force, but through resonance. So if there is one quiet truth to carry with you, let it be this. You are not here to be controlled by life. You are here to participate in it consciously, lovingly, and freely. Nothing outside of you holds the key to your peace unless you place it there. And you can retrieve that key at any moment, not by changing the world, but by remembering who you are beyond it. When you stop letting external conditions define your inner state, you do not become detached from life. You become deeply, exquisitely present within it. And that presence, that gentle, grounded awareness is where true freedom has always been waiting. And as this awareness deepens, you may begin to notice a subtle but powerful shift taking place within you, almost like the turning of a great inner wheel that had been stuck for years and is now moving freely again. You no longer feel compelled to rush toward the next moment as if salvation were hiding there. You no longer cling to yesterday, hoping to extract one more explanation, one more justification, one more fragment of identity from what has already dissolved. Instead, you start to inhabit the present moment as your true home, not as a waiting room for something better, but as a living, breathing field of intelligence that is complete as it is. In this space, time loosens its grip on you. The past no longer whispers accusations into your ear, and the future no longer shouts demands. You begin to see that both were illusions created by a mind that forgot how to rest in being. And when the mind rests, even briefly, the soul steps forward effortlessly. It does not arrive with fanfare. It simply reveals itself as the calm that remains when striving ceases. Here, you start to understand that peace is not fragile. It does not shatter when plans unravel. It does not vanish when people misunderstand you. Peace is not the reward for a life well managed. It is the foundation of a life well lived. And once you touch this truth, not intellectually, but experientially, you can never quite return to the old way of seeing. Something in you has awakened, and awakened awareness does not go back to sleep easily. You may still feel emotions rise and fall. Sadness may visit, fear may knock, anger may appear without warning, but now you meet these experiences differently. You do not merge with them. You do not construct an identity around them. You allow them to move through you like weather passing through a wide open sky. The sky does not fight the storm. It does not judge the clouds. It simply remains spacious enough to contain it all. This spaciousness is your true nature. When you live from this place, life becomes less of a battlefield and more of a classroom. Every interaction carries a lesson, not about how flawed you are, but about how deeply connected everything is. Every challenge becomes an invitation to remember who you are beneath the noise. And even moments of confusion carry a quiet intelligence, gently nudging you back toward alignment when you are willing to listen instead of resist. You begin to sense that there is an order unfolding that does not require your constant supervision. The need to micromanage outcomes softens. Trust begins to replace control, not blind optimism, but a grounded trust rooted in direct experience. You see again and again that when you let go of the illusion that you must force life to cooperate, life often meets you with an ease you never could have engineered. This is not passivity. It is participation without attachment. From here, your choices take on a different quality. You still act, still create, still move forward, but your actions arise from alignment rather than anxiety. You speak because something true wants expression, not because silence makes you uncomfortable. You say yes when it resonates, and no when it doesn't, without the heavy burden of guilt that once accompanied your boundaries. You no longer betray yourself to maintain approval, because approval has lost its power to define you. And perhaps most liberating of all, you stop asking life to guarantee your safety before you trust it. You realize that absolute certainty was never promised, and that waiting for it only delayed your freedom. Instead, you cultivate an inner steadiness that can meet uncertainty without collapsing. You learn to stand in the unknown with an open heart, trusting that clarity reveals itself not in advance, but in motion. In this way, life becomes a dance rather than a test. You move, adjust, respond, and learn, sometimes gracefully, sometimes awkwardly, but always awake. You stop measuring your progress by how little pain you feel and start measuring it by how quickly you return to presence when pain arises. And that return becomes faster, gentler, more natural over time. You may notice that compassion deepens as well. When you no longer need the world to be different in order for you to be okay, you stop demanding that others fulfill roles they were never meant to play. You see their fear, their conditioning, their struggles, and instead of taking it personally, you meet it with understanding. This does not mean you tolerate harm or abandon discernment. It means your responses come from clarity rather than reactivity, and clarity has a softness to it. As this softness grows, so does gratitude, not the performative kind, but a quiet appreciation for the simple fact of being alive. You begin to sense the miracle hidden in ordinary moments, the way breath arrives without effort, the way awareness witnesses thought without being consumed by it, the way life continues to offer itself to you again and again, regardless of how often you misunderstood it. You realize then that freedom was never something you had to earn or achieve. It was something you had to remember. It was always present, patiently waiting beneath layers of belief, fear, and identification. And now, as those layers gently fall away, you step into a way of living that feels both deeply familiar and entirely new. You are no longer controlled by life because you are no longer separate from it. You are not pushing against it, nor are you surrendering your power to it. You are moving with it as it, aware that the same consciousness animating all things is quietly expressing itself through you in this moment. And from this place, every step becomes lighter, every breath more intentional, every moment infused with meaning that does not depend on outcomes. You are free, not because life is perfect, but because you no longer require it to be in order to rest in who you truly are. And as you remain here, rooted in this quieter knowing, you may begin to sense a subtle dissolving of old inner tensions you once assumed were simply part of being human. The constant tightening around outcomes loosens. The habitual bracing for disappointment softens. You discover that much of what you once called strength was actually resistance, and much of what you once called weakness was sensitivity asking to be honored. In this recognition, Something tender and powerful awakens a gentler kind of courage that does not need armor. You start to notice how often the mind once rushed ahead, scanning for danger, replaying conversations, rehearsing defenses. Now, those movements lose their urgency. They may still arise, but they no longer dominate the landscape of your awareness. You see them as passing mental weather, not as instructions. And in that seeing, a deeper intelligence takes the lead, one that trusts life enough to meet it openly, without needing to predict every turn in the road. This is where grace quietly enters. Grace is not something bestowed by an outside force. It is what emerges naturally when you stop interfering with the flow of being. When you no longer insist on controlling how things unfold, you create space for something wiser than personal will to move through you. Actions become simpler. Decisions feel cleaner. You sense when to move and when to wait, not through analysis alone, but through resonance, a felt sense of rightness that doesn't require explanation. In this state, effort gives way to ease. Not because life demands nothing of you, but because you are no longer carrying the unnecessary weight of inner opposition. You do what needs to be done, fully and sincerely, and then you release it. You learn the art of letting action end where action ends, without dragging it into thought, worry, or self-judgment. The moment completes itself, and you are free to meet the next one freshly. There is a profound humility that arises here, but it is not the shrinking kind. It is the humility of recognizing that you are both a unique expression and part of something vast and intelligent beyond personal comprehension. You stop placing yourself at the center of every narrative. Life no longer feels like a verdict on your worth. It feels like a mystery unfolding, one you are privileged to witness from the inside. And in that humility, a quiet joy surfaces. This joy does not depend on excitement or constant positivity. It is steady, grounded, and inclusive. It allows room for sorrow without being eclipsed by it. It allows room for uncertainty without needing immediate answers. It is the joy of alignment, the sense that regardless of circumstances, you are in right relationship with yourself and with life as it is. You begin to trust that nothing essential can be taken from you, because what you are is not an object that can be lost. You are the awareness in which loss is perceived. You are the presence that remains when roles dissolve, when identities shift, when chapters close, and this realization changes how you move through endings. You grieve when necessary, but you do not cling. You honor what was without imprisoning yourself in it. From this place, forgiveness arises naturally, not as a moral obligation, but as a recognition of reality. You see that holding resentment binds you to the very conditions you long to transcend. You understand that forgiveness is not about condoning behavior. It is about releasing your inner state from the past's authority. And when you let go in this way, you feel the immediate relief of reclaiming your own energy. You notice how much vitality returns when you stop rehearsing old stories. Creativity stirs. Curiosity reawakens. You feel drawn toward experiences not because they promise validation, but because they invite exploration. Life regains its sense of wonder, not the naive wonder of expectation, but the mature wonder of presence. And presence, once cultivated, becomes your anchor. Even in moments of chaos, something in you stays steady. Even when emotions surge, there is an underlying calm that does not disappear. You learn to trust this calm, to return to it again and again until it becomes more familiar than the old patterns of tension. You begin to live from a deeper center, one that does not wobble with every external shift. This center is not rigid. It is fluid, responsive, alive. It allows you to engage fully without becoming entangled. It allows you to care deeply without losing yourself. And from this balance, your relationships change. You listen more openly. You speak more honestly. You give without depletion because you are no longer giving to earn something in return. You start to see that love, like peace, is not something you get. It is something you allow to flow through you when the obstacles are removed. And the greatest obstacle was never the world. It was the belief that the world needed to be a certain way for you to be free. Now that belief loosens its hold. You walk forward with a quieter confidence, one that does not announce itself. You no longer need to convince others of who you are, because you are no longer trying to convince yourself. Life becomes less about proving and more about expressing, less about arriving and more about being. And in this being, you discover that true freedom was never about escaping life's conditions. It was about meeting them without surrendering your inner authority. It was about remembering, moment by moment, that you are the source of the meaning you experience. So you continue not striving, not resisting, but participating with awareness. Each moment offers itself as it is, and you meet it with presence. Each breath reminds you that you are alive now, not yesterday, not tomorrow. And in this ongoing return to the present, you live as you were always meant to live, awake, aligned, and quietly free. And as this way of being settles more deeply into your life, you may notice that silence itself begins to feel different. No longer empty or awkward, it becomes nourishing. In the quiet spaces, between thoughts, between words, between moments, you sense a living presence that does not need narration. It simply is. And the more you allow yourself to rest there, the more you realize that this presence has always been with you, patiently waiting beneath the noise of becoming. You start to understand that much of what you once chased was not wrong, but misplaced. You were never seeking achievement, approval, or security for their own sake. You were seeking the feeling you believed they would give you, and now you see that those feelings, peace, fulfillment, wholeness, were never contained in outcomes. They were always qualities of being accessible the moment you stopped outsourcing them to the world. This realization gently rearranges your priorities. What once felt urgent loses its sharp edge. What once felt essential reveals itself as optional. You still care, still engage, still contribute, but there is a lightness in how you hold it all. Life becomes less of a personal referendum and more of a shared unfolding. You are involved, but not entangled. Invested, but not imprisoned. There is a quiet maturity in this stance. You stop asking life to protect you from discomfort, and instead you trust yourself to meet whatever arises. You see now that discomfort was never the enemy. Unconsciousness was. And with awareness present, even difficulty carries information rather than threat. It shapes you without defining you. It refines you without diminishing you. You begin to notice how deeply you can trust yourself, not the reactive self, not the frightened self, but the observing self that remains steady beneath it all. This trust does not come from knowing how everything will turn out. It comes from knowing who you are regardless of how things turn out. And this knowing is profoundly stabilizing. From here, patience grows naturally. Not the forced patience of endurance, but the organic patience that arises when you are no longer trying to escape the present moment. You stop rushing life as if it were behind schedule. You sense that timing has an intelligence of its own, and that much unfolds precisely when it is ready, not when demanded by fear or impatience. And with patience comes compassion for yourself. You begin to soften the inner voice that once criticized every misstep. You see that harsh self-judgment was never a motivator. It was a misunderstanding. You learn to guide yourself the way a wise teacher would, with clarity, firmness when needed, but always with respect. And in that respectful inner environment, growth accelerates without strain. You realize that you are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to learn as you go. You are allowed to change your mind, your direction, your understanding. Life is no longer a performance that must be perfected. It is an experience meant to be lived consciously. As this awareness integrates, gratitude deepens further, not as a practice you remember to do, but as a natural response to seeing clearly. Gratitude for breath, gratitude for awareness, gratitude for the simple fact that you can witness this moment at all. And this gratitude does not ignore pain, it includes it. Recognizing even pain as a teacher that eventually returns you to presence. You may find that fear still arises at times, but it no longer feels absolute. It becomes transparent. You see it for what it is, a contraction around imagined futures. And instead of fighting it, you bring awareness to it. You breathe, you stay, and in staying, fear loses its authority. It cannot survive sustained presence. This is one of the great freedoms. You reclaim the freedom to remain present even when the mind predicts disaster. The freedom to feel uncertainty without needing to resolve it immediately. The freedom to say, I don't know what comes next, and I am still okay. From this place, life opens in subtle but meaningful ways. You become more receptive to intuition, not as something mystical or dramatic, but as a quiet inner alignment that guides you gently. You sense when something is for you and when it is not. You feel when it is time to move and when it is time to rest. And you trust these signals because they arise from a place deeper than fear or desire. You no longer need life to reassure you constantly because reassurance has become internal. You are anchored, you are present, you are awake. And in this awakened state, you discover that true freedom is not an achievement at the end of a journey. It is the quality of consciousness you bring to each step along the way. So you continue not towards some distant ideal, but within this living moment, you continue noticing, allowing, responding, remembering. And with each return to presence, the illusion of being controlled by life weakens further. What remains is a simple, powerful truth, lived rather than spoken. You are not here to be defined by conditions, shaped by fear, or limited by circumstance. You are here to express the intelligence of life itself, consciously and compassionately, through the unique form that is you. And as you live from this knowing, freedom ceases to be a concept and becomes a felt reality, quiet, steady, and always available, waiting for you again and again in the only place it has ever lived, right here, right now.